Welcome to From the VC's Bookshelf, a podcast from TBR, the College System of Tennessee, the state's largest higher education system. In this series, we examine how we might re-envision the work we do and how we work together as we move into a post-pandemic world. Please join our host, Dr. Heidi Lemming, Vice Chancellor for Student Success, as she leads a live discussion with industry experts and leaders throughout our system.
In our fall 2023 podcast series, we are leaning into themes found in Atomic Habits by author James Clear. The TBR System Office has been engaged in testing out mindset interventions with students in gateway courses for about 7 years now. And while Atomic Habits doesn't specifically use the word mindset, the book touches on similar themes. So our series will draw connections between the two bodies of work and also highlight how our research partners, faculty, and staff are working to change student habits and mindsets in support of academic success and college completion. In today's podcast, I'm excited to be talking to Andrea Green from Motlow State Community College. Andrea is an associate professor of English and teaches literature, composition, and learning support writing. Andrea is a Motlow alumni who began her academic journey in 2009 as a first-generation non-traditional student and went on to earn a Master's of Arts degree in literature. Andrea served as Motlow's Learning Support Coordinator for several years and was the recipient of the 2020 Motlow Faculty Excellence Award. She's also a member of Faculty Council and the co-editor-in-chief of Motlow's Literary Journal. Andrea has participated in multiple TBR faculty learning communities, which focused on co-requisite writing and high-impact practices, also known as HIPs. She was selected as a member of the 2022 inaugural cohort of HIP ambassadors and returned as the 2023 ambassador for learning communities. Through her work with the Ambassador Program and Motlow's Academic Resource Center, she hosts various professional development and training sessions to help broaden faculty's understanding of high-impact practices and academic mindset. Welcome, Andrea, and I'm excited to talk to you. Once again. We know each other actually pretty well, as evidenced by this very strong introduction about all the things that you're engaged in, particularly with the TBR system around high-impact practices.
I've enjoyed it. It's been fun, and it's helped me with my own pedagogy and my own courses.
Yeah. Well, we always appreciate having strong faculty advocates on campus for the work that we're doing around this, and you've certainly been one of them, so that's how we've gotten to know each other over the years. Today, though, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the mindset work and kind of an interplay of that with our high-impact practice work. Obviously, your role as an ambassador to help promote that. But I always want to give some space at the start of the conversation for you just to share, specifically what role you've played in advancing mindset principles at Motlow State Community College.
Well, the first thing that I benefited from was the FLCs. So I worked with Dr. Melinda Connor. We did several faculty learning communities where I learned about high impact practices. And as we talked about with orientation with the ambassadors, my first year as an ambassador, so many faculty members don't know that they're using high impact practices. So that helped me become aware, first of all, and then I was able to help other faculty understand what high impact practices were. But at the college, because I'm a learning support coordinator, I'm able to do what's called annual plans of improvement, or APIs. Part of our APIs have been focused on reworking the 0810 courses and that Gateway 1010 course. So since I developed some of the asynchronous courses as well, I'm able to put several of those high quality dimensions right into the course. They're threaded throughout. So for example, our 1010 course, we have several students that when they take that course asynchronous or on ground, the very first activity they have is a discussion board, which is that high impact practice. And it's close to what Clear talks about in the book in terms of identity. The first question we give them is, it's entitled Uniquely Me. It's a discussion board, and it's got several different avenues of tell me your biggest accomplishment. Tell me the one thing you could not live without in your life besides a necessity. Discuss what your challenges are. And it gives them just a platform and room to discuss some of their insecurities, some of their successes, and they get to know one another. Mm-hmm. In the 0810 course, the first discussion board is growth versus fixed mindset. So the very first thing we do is make them aware of that And then through the rest of the course, since it is that important gateway course, we do that integrative learning. How does this connect to other courses? Constant reflection, constant feedback. So I've been able to do that as a developer and a maintainer. And then we have 3 other ambassadors the first year at my campus, which is great because we can work closely together. Chuck Whiting and I shared an office for 3 years. So when he became an ambassador, we just kind of feed off of each other. So, and I think we have 3 this year. So the calls have helped, learning from other faculty, and then I just have a really supportive department.
Yeah, so folks understand. So our HIP ambassadors, high impact practice ambassadors, we have lots of acronyms. We have to be careful how many of those we use. They are advocates for particular practices and serve as consultants to faculty across our system. So not just at Motlow State, but at other institutions. If a faculty member is curious about how to embed a particular practice in a course, they can reach out to our ambassadors for that help. The calls that Andrea mentioned are offered pretty much monthly throughout the year, where various topics are addressed related to a specific practice. So tell us a little bit about the specific high impact practice that you're an ambassador for and what that is, because maybe not everyone knows, for example, what a learning community is.
So I am the ambassador for learning communities. Little background, I started at Motlow with the 0810 1010 courses, right? We went to the co-requisite model instead of the prerequisite. So I have been the learning support coordinator for several years. We've been trying to develop those courses into OER to help the students, to change the curriculum, to help them, especially with the new technology that's coming around, how to help that as well. So my calls have been focused on learning communities. That's what I'm ambassador for. In a learning community, of course, you have 2 courses that you are taking in concert. It's usually a cohort of individuals, maybe the same teacher, but not the same teacher. But the curriculum is tethered, but there's also that external component. So as a cohort, what are they doing outside of the classroom? And for our 0810 a lot of that, actually this last semester, we revamped it to you have a feedback reflection where you have to request feedback outside from our writing center, from a different embedded tutor. So the learning communities really help the students see how the curriculum feeds off each other and their courses are connected. Again, that integrative learning, where they may not get in other courses, because unfortunately so many students, I often hear that I don't know why I have to take this course if this is my discipline, if this is what I want to do. Why do I have to take this course? Learning communities help those students understand that connectivity. So the calls that I've had, I've done calls on a mindset for students, understanding the purpose of their course. I've done calls on understanding how to do a learning community just in the classroom, then branching out and how to create one on campuses, not just in the co-requisite courses, but in various courses. And I'm moving toward, since it's the end of my tenure as an ambassador, the question I keep receiving from faculty, and this is what I love about being an ambassador, is I learn from so many individuals from other institutions. The number one question I'm getting is the mindset of the faculty member. How do we take 2 experienced, intelligent individuals who have their own pedagogical style, and how do we blend those styles and make it to where it's cohesive for students to understand for that learning community? So my work moving forward for the rest of the semester is helping faculty members understand collegiality and congruity and how to work in a learning community for your students.
The thing I love about how mindset is applicable to a learning community is this conversation around reflection and kind of purpose, and how that can be focused in more global, broader ways to connect between courses, but also the out of classroom conversations. You mentioned in your intro just some of the assignments that the students are given to have that space, that time to reflect. Have you noticed as an instructor some common themes in what you're seeing students write about that you want to share, maybe that might be interesting for our listeners to know about?
Absolutely, and I think it's applicable to what Clear talks about in terms of insecurities and identity and environment. So many of our students enter into academia not understanding the rigor, number one. Number 2, they don't understand the culture of academia and what that means. And that last part is they unfortunately so often see their school as ancillary to their normal every day. And it's one of the phrases that kind of bothers me at times when I hear someone say, well, when you get in the real world, when you get to your real job, and we want to break that mentality and let them know this is, as Clear talks about, a strategy, a process to get to that end. You know, he talks about strategies versus goals. And that section hit me because my pedagogy is based on process versus product. Because my students, I want them to understand the process they're going through. Yes, you need the product. Yes, you're going to earn the grade. But what skill set are you learning along the way? So for my students, I consistently hear about their insecurities and how the coursework and their platform to reflect has helped them break down those insecurities. And they also get to see other students who feel the same way that they do, who are going through the same experience. And that helps a lot. So reflection is at the core of our 1010 Gateway course, and it's at the core of our 0810 course, and it's helped a lot.
So for, again, folks who don't maybe even know what co-requisite means, so can you kind of talk us through like that model of instruction and how mindset plays into that particular course?
So it's different at each institution in terms of how they structure it. At Motlow, we have the embedded tutor. So we have our 0810 writing, learning support writing, is tethered to our 1010 composition 1. If it's an asynchronous course, to help with those students since they don't have an on-ground course, we have one instructor who teaches both asynchronous courses, and then we also have an embedded tutor in there. So both individuals work, they have different areas, different duties in terms of reflection, constant feedback, discussion boards, quizzes, major assignments. On-ground courses, students are registered for an English 0810, and they take it concurrently with an English 1010. And we work very hard in our department to ensure that the competencies for English 0810 learning support and the student learning outcomes for English 1010, that they're tethered, that they match, that you're working along the way. I always tell my students 0810 support is literally support. And I try to change their mindset because several of them see it as punitive. And their reflections I have heard, I can't believe I have to take 2 courses. I'm not good at English anyway, now I have to take 2. And I try to change their mindset from the outset, and I tell them, I'm your personal tutor. You get a tutoring session with me, you get one-on-one, because the embedded model is focused around conferencing. So students show us their work every week, and we go over it, we ask questions. It's very much a private tutoring session each class period with different students, and it helps them so much, and it changes their mindset.
Yeah, I really like, again, that conversation about, you know, we call it co-rec. What does that really mean? It's not meant to say that you're less or anything. It's really to give you that other support to be successful. So when we're thinking about mindset principles and a growth mindset, I mean, you've got students probably coming in who think, I'm just not a good writer. I just can't write. So, you know, how does that mindset intervention kind of change that perspective for the student?
The way that I tackle this in my classes, and it helped when I was learning support coordinator because I could kind of disseminate this information. Here's what I do in my classes. I do an activity in my on-ground 0810 classes the very first day that I think shocks a little bit the students, but I asked them, I was like, okay, I give my little, this is who I am, Professor Green, this is the course. And I ask all of them, raise your hand if you really don't want to be here. And no one raises their hand. So I asked again, I was like, now's your moment. If you don't want to be here in this 0810 class, raise your hand, be honest with me. And slowly the arms start to trickle and I don't want to be here. I'm like, why? And they give me that, it's a punishment. I have to take 2 of these just because I didn't do well. And my teacher told me I was a bad writer. So I give my little cheerleader, I'm your tutor. It's okay. We're going to help you your 1010 work before you ever submit it. I get to look at it. I get to help you. Number 2, I use 2 scholars. Their work that when I took the University of Alabama, my degrees kind of split between Rec Comp and Lit. And there's a article by Donald Murray, he was a composition scholar, that teach writing as a process, not a product. And then, of course, the rhetorician Peter Elbow has one of my favorite quotes of all time, which is, standard written English is no one's mother tongue. And I write that on the board in giant, bold letters because I do have a lot of ELL, English language learners, in those 0810 courses. And we talk about that statement. What does it mean that it's a process versus a product? You're going to be improving continually. And the second thing is, if standard written English is no one's mother tongue, what does that mean? So I let students write however they want to in their process writing, whatever gets you to the end. And it slowly starts to chip away at their insecurities. It slowly starts to help them understand, I'm not a bad writer. Everyone is struggling like I am. Everyone makes errors. And I've seen some wonderful examples of students who years later are taking my literature courses that they do not understand how far they've come. And I have to redirect them and say, look where you were and look where you're at now.
Mm-hmm. I love what you just said, process versus product, because in a lot of ways there's some similarities with the book when we talk about the difference, with goals and kind of systemness, but also thinking about habit forming. Because when you're working through different steps in a process, you're trying to build good habits, right? Mm-hmm. So I like that there's kind of some similarity there in how you're teaching, which is, of course, why we're trying to draw themes from the book, because there is so much that can be applied to students' lives, too, in terms of how we do habit forming. So give me some tidbits on advice you give to students when we think about that habit forming that needs to be developed in a correct course.
My student, it was part of the book. It was funny because I listened to your previous podcast and some of the others that have been talking about this book. And y'all stopped on the question of, is motivation overrated? And I've been thinking about this since I started reading it with my students in terms of habit, because I think we can absolutely use this model in the classroom to help students with habit. But I think we also need to be cognizant of how many students we have in the classroom, their individual personalities, and whether they will navigate naturally with a habit and help them versus they're not going to build that habit because it's not one that's good for them or it's not one that they even want to do. So I think motivation is, first of all, we do need to pay attention to whether our students are motivated to even try a habit. But in my class, the biggest thing for me is mirroring habits. I want to model my habits for my students, and I have noticed several semesters over the years that students pick up what I'm doing. For example, because I teach literature, I never had a professor who would show me what he or she wrote in their book, their annotations. They would just talk about it and I'd follow along. Well, we have an Elmo in almost every single classroom. I annotate all the time. And when I teach something, I reread and I annotate. And I show it on the Elmo. I'll put it on the overhead for my students to see my annotations, for them to see my notes. So I start to notice after 2 or 3 weeks in my literature courses that the students who don't take notes, they don't know how to take notes, that they're starting to highlight. They're starting to annotate. And they're starting to move away. I'm not going to annotate what she has, but these are my notes. I have students who, we talk about studies of music and how music helps with writing, how it puts you in a certain space. So at the beginning of the semester for composition courses, while they're writing, I let them use their earbuds if they want. But I tell them I'm going to play music while you're writing. In the first few weeks, they don't particularly care for it. And then I do it every time on the 4th week. I'll turn off the writing during a peer review session. And it's very quiet in the classroom. And one of my students will say, Professor Green, are you going to turn on that music? I'm like, sure, I'll turn on the music. And then their reflection at the end of the semester, almost every semester, I have 2 or 3 students in my composition courses saying, I've picked up the habit of turning on music while I write and shutting out everything else. Or I've picked up the habit of annotating now, even if I don't think I'm going to use those notes. So I think instructors just inside the classroom, you can model good habits for your students.
Right. And you're making it easy. I mean, that was one of when we talk about the model that they talk in the book for making a habit easy is obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. So you're making it easy in the sense of you're showing them directly, but in some ways it's like also obvious, right? Because you're visibly seeing what the instructor's doing.
And consistency is key. My students know when they come in the classroom that these are the activities we're going to do every day. It's outlined from the beginning in terms of the class schedule, but I make sure that I deliver on that. So my students pick up habits rather quickly, and I try to control the environment to help them as much as possible with those habits.
Okay, so you've had a chance to read the book. It talks again about kind of this difference between systems and a process that leads to results versus individual goals. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, and particularly as it relates to the work that you've been doing both with high impact practices and mindset. You know, we're obviously a system of institutions trying to deploy this work across many types of schools, but at the end of the day, it comes down to individuals and the goals that they have. So what are your thoughts about that model?
I think the model can work for individuals. For anyone, it can work. But I think one of the things that Clear, he tries to disabuse his audience of this idea that we've heard of, oh, well, it takes 21 days to build a habit, it takes 21 days to break a habit. His system is simplistic and simultaneously very intricate and nuanced. I mean, he's got the first one, what is it? It's make it obvious, and then it's 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Right. So each thing expands.
Yeah.
Just in terms of time with students. I see my students 80 minutes twice a week for 15 weeks. So I try to put in my students' mind, it's about a 40-hour work week is what I get to see you every semester. Mm-hmm. So in that limited time, again, modeling number one, that will help. Number two, I think it has to move beyond the individual classroom. I think other instructors, this needs to be talked about in department meetings. It needs to be talked about college-wide. How can we make habits? Unfortunately, not being pessimistic, but I don't think that I would be able to do what Clear says in the books with each of my students during every semester.
Right.
And again, there comes that motivation. They have to be motivated to make the change, to do the habit. Mm-hmm. And because, as we talked about previously, the rigor of college, the stress of college, maybe being underprepared, I think the system can work. But I'd like to see his discussion in a framework specifically of pedagogical methods. What do you do in your pedagogy with the atomic habits he talks about with the system? Mm-hmm. Right now, they're a little splintered for me. Mm-hmm. I wish there was a little bit more overlap. And I'm looking forward to seeing someone who's going to do the work on this and see what happens when you try to bring this into the classroom and thread it throughout your pedagogy.
Yeah. Good. Well, and we certainly aren't saying that everything is perfect with the book, but that's, I think, again, important conversation to have. Like, what are some of the nuggets, but then also what are some of the challenges still, ways that we do the work differently? Obviously we're trying to get better results for our students through our efforts in the classroom and showing that faculty are there to support them. Certainly you've shared some examples of that with the co-rec. What do you see are some other connections that we can make that you've tested at your institution when it relates to mindset?
We try, of course, we have, student success and support. We try to support our students inside and outside of the classroom. And I think that outside support is so vital. We have several services outside that if I see a student who is struggling with a fixed mindset, and that's one of the things as well, just to kind of back up, when we did the orientation for the ambassadors, I think it was this last year, the second year for me, I had to stop and think about my own mindset. Mm-hmm. Because I think as faculty members, we tend to think, well, we have a growth mindset. We've achieved this. Tons of failures, tons of moments when they were fixed mindset. Mm-hmm. I often have imposter syndrome, and it just stymies me from moving forward. And learning about my own understanding of growth versus fixed mindset helped, number one. So I think it would be important if all instructors took a moment and faculty took a moment just to kind of reflect on their own mindset. Mm-hmm. That would be step one. Mm-hmm. And then step two moving forward is, again, consistency in all courses where that mindset, it's inside and outside classroom support. And we have a lot at Motlow. We have the student services. We have our completion coaches are wonderful. We reach out to them as much as possible. And then we also give them platforms for that growth mindset. The Mosaic, the literary magazine that I'm working with, and we're reissuing that. And we are consistently speaking to our students about, I know that you don't think you can do this, but you can. And talk about growth mindset in a way without actually saying growth mindset.
Right. Mm-hmm. So you're talking a lot about environmental context with this and how you are structuring an institution to support those students. Are there other examples of things that you think institutions, faculty should be doing in terms of that educational environment to support students?
I think being cognizant of the various learners that we have in our classrooms. I always say the classroom that's the foundation right there. That's what they're there for. I tell my students, I'm here because you're here. Right? That's the foundation for them in a way that I think sometimes the outside stuff, it is, as I just said, it's important. But in my classroom, in terms of the environment, I do something that I know a lot of my colleagues do, and I've learned from them. I've borrowed from them. I have students who hate writing in the classroom. I don't like writing in the classroom. I never have. I don't like writing in the classroom. It's silent, but you have the pencils and you have the tapping. And it's very unnerving for me. I've become cognizant of that in my classroom, and I let students write with earbuds in. I let students, in all honesty, if they want to lie on the floor in their belly and they want to write because that's how they would do it at home, I allow them to do that. The environment of my classroom is very much, how is it going to work for this specific group of students? And I've experienced that this semester. I have 2 literature courses. One has 24 students. One has 12, and they're back to back. So I went in thinking, okay, this is how I'm going to help my students, how I'm going to structure my lectures. And I noticed 2 weeks in, what was working for my 24 group of students at 2 o'clock was absolutely not working for my 3:30 group of students that only has 12. And I stopped and reflected on why. They were in different disciplines. They knew each other. They were all friends. It's a different time of day. So I had to change my lectures. I had to change my methods to help them because they were just kind of blocked there for a couple of weeks. So a lot of that mindset for them is on the instructor, that environment, how welcoming you make it. Cell phones are another one for me. For so long, I had instructors, don't use cell phones. And I said, don't use cell phones. And now instead, we have moments. We have what I call popcorn moments where, okay, everybody take a 2-minute break. You just finish your quiz, get that social media feed in, look at whatever, check your cell phone, see if there's a text message. And they literally, most of them don't look at it, but it gives them a break instead of a moratorium. And we use it for research. We use it for reading OER texts. So I try to make it as welcoming as possible. I know a lot of my colleagues do. Less arbitrator of the classroom versus students. So it's a learning for all of us.
Yeah, that's great. There's some really good examples in there I like hearing. And you being an ambassador for learning communities. So, I mean, that's part of that environment too, right?
Exactly.
Because you're part of a learning community is that out of classroom activities, because that helps bond students together. So can you speak to, I guess, what that has looked like for you all?
We have several, our tutoring services have grown so much, and I'm so proud of them because I give extra credit if students go to the writing center. And I have several students who go to the writing center, and we have so many different modalities for students. So in terms of my courses, just writing, they've got the writing center. They can either go to on ground, they can do virtual, they can do e-appointments. That's that outside support that they get. And that almost everyone, as I said again, the 0810, they have to go. It's part of their assignment. But we have found that once they start going, they understand how beneficial it is. And it's not an extra writing. It's not an extra duty. You have to do an extra assignment. It's something you get to do. Reframing their thinking. It's something that's going to benefit you that you get to do. And we do something really good at Motlow. Our D2L courses, I just saw this today. I logged into Grade, and we have a banner with our colors, the green and the yellow, that says tutoring is for all learners. So we're breaking down that mindset again of, oh, if you're tutoring, you're a bad writer, you're a bad student, you don't know this. No, it's for everyone.
Yeah, and I actually think in previous institutions I've worked at, some of the best students are going to tutoring. They're like the stronger students that take advantage of tutoring anyway, because they figured it out earlier in the process that, you know, it's for everyone and it's going to help me do better. So, and they are. We're talking a little bit, we've mentioned a couple of things, acronyms with technology. D2L is a learning platform. OER is open educational resources, which is just, you know, essentially free materials, so you're not having to buy textbooks. So we're really embracing the use of technology in a lot of ways. And I'm just kind of curious, you know, lots of conversation around the use of AI. And so how do you see this impacting, I guess, mindset specifically, if you can think about it in that context?
It is such a difficult question for me.
Or even habit forming. It might be another just technology that we get addicted to. I don't know.
And in my discipline in particular, when it comes to AI, it's very, very tricky because we always go back to the student learning outcomes and course objectives. We were supposed to be teaching them how to write, how to communicate, how to critically think in their writing, argumentation. And for me, AI is simply a tool. AI is a tool. It's a new tool. It's an ever-evolving tool. But when you use any type of tool, the very first thing is, first of all, what's the purpose? Why am I using it? Number two, what skill set do I need to use it effectively? And then the last thing is, what's the outcome? And if those three things don't work in tandem and you don't understand them, you can use the tool in the wrong ways. So in my courses, unfortunately, I have several students who they're using AI not as it's marketed or intended, because I just did a professional development on this for Motlow in plagiarism in AI. And most of the research that I've read has talked about how students use it as a beginning instead of an end. So most of these AI, they're marketed as revise, rewrite, revisit your writing, do a reverse outline. Students aren't using it that way, unfortunately. They're using it as, you're going to give me a prompt. I'm going to type the prompt in to ChatGPT. It's going to give me 6 paragraphs, and this is what I'm going to put on there. They don't understand what was given. They don't understand why. So it goes back again to process versus product. What we've done in my department, I have some faculty members who are testing AI in their classroom to see how students use it. I'm interested to see how that's going to work at the end of the semester. But what we've done as a department is 2 things. First of all, open discussion. If this is something where AI is flagged or we see that it's AI, let's stop and have a discussion with the student. Do you understand what this tool is? Again, those 3 things. Do you understand the purpose? What are your skills using it? What is your outcome? The second thing is that we are really embedding process throughout our assignments. So outlines, thesis statements, let me see your brainstorming, let me see your invention stage. Most of the students I've seen that use AI, there is no process at all. It's just that final product. So I'm not against AI. I am wary. But again, I think it's just something that we need to test a little more in terms of their mindset. Students, I don't think they're using it the way that they need to or the way that it's intended. And I can't honestly get a grasp on their current mindset. I think it's going to take a few semesters for us, especially in my discipline, to really kind of navigate AI and see what we need to do.
Okay, well, I will follow up in a year or 2 to see where we are with the use of AI, particularly in composition courses, right? I think that's going to be interesting to see how it evolves. I mean, you're right. It is an evolving area, so it's kind of hard to track right now. Okay, we're kind of towards the end of our time. Definitely want to hear, though, when we think about more of the salient themes from the book, as we conclude our time, things you want to make sure that students who might be listening or future students, other faculty, what are the key takeaways?
For me, the 2 key takeaways, the first one is it is absolutely okay to fail. It is perfectly fine for you to fail. I think he threads that throughout. I failed in this, I failed in that. This did not work for me. It's trial and error. Failure is okay. And I'm very honest with my students about my failures. And I show them my failures. And then I show them the process, how I worked out of that failure to get that product you see that looks so nice and shiny. Failure, number 1. Number 2, environment. I'm always very, very aware of my classroom environment, whether it's digital or whether it's on ground. Environment is so important. And I don't think before actually I became an ambassador, I really thought as much about my mindset and what I was modeling for my students. So environment is key to habits, and understanding you're going to fail. Those are the 2 big takeaways for me and what I really enjoyed in this book.
That's great. Andrea, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me today. And I have to thank you also for being a high impact practice ambassador for us for 2 years. Because you're sharing your wisdom, your insight with other faculty, encouraging them to consider using high impact practices, which we know have a huge impact on student success, particularly with students who are underprepared. And so this is part of our completion work. It's so important. And I just want to thank you so much for your efforts in that space.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this edition of From the VC's Bookshelf, brought to you by TBR, the College System of Tennessee, powering the state's economy and changing the lives of thousands of graduates, starting successful careers each year. To learn more about upcoming book selections or to register to attend discussions live, visit tbr.edu/bookshelf.